So we were on the section on page 235, Aspiring and Engaging Bodhicitta. Okay, so according to its nature, bodhicitta may be of two kinds. Aspiring bodhicitta is the wish to attain full awakening for the benefit of all sentient beings. Engaging bodhicitta is the maturation of that wish so that it is accomplished by the bodhisattva ethical restraints and the commitments to practice the perfections and the 4 ways of gathering disciples, which are discussed in the next chapter. So initially, our bodhicitta is contrived. We all know that. Okay? But that's the way you got to start. You know, if we don't start with contrived bodhicitta, there's no other way to start. Yeah. So don't get down on yourself and say, oh, I'm just saying the words. I don't really have the feeling. I should have the feeling. You know, the Dharma path is one that we have to cultivate for a long time. And it's all the times of meditating when we don't have some wow experience that create the time for when we do have some strong experience. Okay? So don't expect in your meditations that you're always going to have, you know, a deep feeling. You may not, but don't judge your meditations or your practice on that. Yeah, because that's just a mind looking for the next high. Okay? So just be content to do your practice, familiarize yourself with these virtuous thoughts, with the worldview, and as you do that gradually, then, you know, experiences kind of rest in your heart, and you see that you're actually changing your world outlook. Yeah. So, you know, we're junkies for like, I want a strong spiritual experience, you know. And, you know, like I said, that's just junkie mentality. Yeah. So it's a thing of, you know, just do your practice, and slowly, gradually, as you do it, your mind transforms by itself. Yeah. And you know, our bodhicitta starts out contrived, and then slowly we begin to feel it more and more. It isn't always an upward line. It goes up and down because our mind is not very steady. Okay. And remember that it takes a long time to generate bodhicitta. Now, remember His Holiness said that it's easy to understand, but it takes a long time to generate it. So just be content, do your practice, reflect on the meditations, continue on. It's contrived. That's good. It's better than my self-centered thought. Isn't it? So continuing to reflect on the 2 methods to generate bodhicitta, we develop it so that it becomes uncontrived. Participating in the ceremony of generating aspiring bodhicitta in the presence of our spiritual mentor helps us to do this. This is called receiving aspiring bodhicitta in a ceremony, and it helps to stabilize our determination to cultivate bodhicitta. Okay. So this is the first step. If you look in the Red Prayer Book under the section on inspiring bodhicitta, yeah, there's things, guidelines, so that you don't it doesn't degenerate this life, and guidelines so it doesn't degenerate in future lives. In this first step, you are not taking any of those guidelines. You're simply generating bodhicitta in the presence of your spiritual mentor. That never hurts to do. Yeah, even if it's contrived, it never harms to do that. You're not taking any vows or precepts, but you are generating bodhicitta, so you should have some aspiration to really generate bodhicitta and not just be like, yeah, there's a ceremony, I'll do it, because you are, generating the feeling and making the resolve to attain Buddhahood for the sake of all beings. So it should be something that you want to generate and want to do. Okay, even though you're not taking any kind of commitments at that point. Then, second step. Later, when we feel capable of training in the causes for keeping our bodhicitta from deteriorating, we can again generate bodhicitta in the presence of our teacher with the thought never to give it up. Okay, so this is different. The first one you just generate. Now you generate bodhicitta, but you're thinking, I will never give it up. So this is called receiving aspiring bodhicitta with commitment in a ceremony. At this time, we assume the precepts of aspiring bodhicitta to prevent our bodhicitta from deteriorating in this and future lives. Okay, so you're taking on those guidelines of aspiring bodhicitta in this second way. The actual words you say and the ceremony is exactly the same. So it's your mind that determines whether you're doing it as receiving aspiring bodhicitta in a ceremony or receiving aspiring bodhicitta with commitment in a ceremony. It's up to you. Okay. Then, next stage, after training the mind in aspiring bodhicitta with commitment, we can assume the bodhisattva ethical restraints. Doing this is engaging bodhicitta. Okay, so aspiring bodhicitta, you're aspiring to generate it. Engaging it is you're saying, I'm going to do the practices that will lead me to full awakening. Okay, so you're actually engaging with things. Okay, so this is, wait a minute. So doing this is engaging bodhicitta. Most bodhisattva aspirants take the bodhisattva precepts before they are full-fledged bodhisattvas with uncontrived bodhicitta. Okay? Because often you take them before empowerments, you generate bodhicitta in ceremonies. We generate engaged bodhicitta and take the bodhisattva ethical restraints, and yet our bodhicitta is still contrived. Okay, so the bodhisattva precepts at this point are a similitude. Yeah, they're not the actual bodhisattva precepts, because to assume the actual ones, you have to have actual engaging bodhicitta. Okay, so they're a similitude, but that doesn't mean that we should say, well, it's only a similitude, so I don't really have to try and keep them. No, we try and keep them, yeah, and we do our best with that. So they're not the actual bodhisattva precepts, but they help us to develop bodhicitta and practice the bodhisattva conduct. Okay, is that clear with people? In the Tibetan tradition, the bodhisattva ethical restraints consist of 18 root and 46 auxiliary precepts. They were taught by the Buddha at different times and initially were scattered throughout the Sanskrit sutras. Asanga, Shantideva, and Chandragoman collated them, and the present set was formed by combining their lists. Yeah, so the Bodhisattva precepts were not originally spoken as a list 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They were spread throughout the sutras that speak of the Bodhisattva conduct, and then these great Indian sages picked out the important ones and collated it, and then made it into a list of the Bodhisattva precepts, and there's a ceremony where you take it. Okay, so this is different than the monastic precepts. Yeah, the monastic precepts actually, we didn't start out with any precepts, And it was only when people started making mistakes that then the Buddha set up specific precepts. And then right after the Buddha's parinirvana, the 500 arhats came together, and then they put it all, they had been making lists before, because it was recited every 2 weeks in the Bodhisattva ceremony, but they standardized it and really said, okay, these are the monastic precepts. And so it very early on, you receive those as a standard set, that the Buddha had given, because he had given each precept. While the Buddha was alive, he was still adding precepts, revising ones he had already given, if different circumstances arose. And so that was a very organic, lived set, that the Buddha established according to circumstances, whereas the Bodhisattva precepts were, practices that were in the sutras, and then collated and made into a list later. Okay. 2 renditions of the Bodhisattva ethical code exist in Chinese Buddhism. The Brahmajala Sutra contains 10 root and 48 auxiliary precepts, and the Yogacharya Bhumi Sutra has 4 root and 41 auxiliary precepts. There is much overlap between the lists in these 2 scriptures, as well as with the Bodhisattva precepts of the Tibetan tradition. So lots of overlap. They're not completely different sets of things. In the Chinese and Tibetan traditions, both monastics and lay followers take the Bodhisattva ethical restraints with the intention to keep them until full awakening. So monastic precepts, your 5 lay precepts, those are taken for the rest of our life. Bodhisattva precepts are taken from now until full awakening. Okay. All transgressions, no matter how serious, can be purified through confession and repentance. Okay? And then also, there's a difference here, is in that the pratimoksha precepts, either the 5 lay precepts or your monastic precepts, especially the monastic precepts, you just take once, and as long as you have them, you don't keep retaking them. You purify them in the fortnightly posada ceremonies. In terms of, for lay people, retaking the refuge and the 5 precepts, some teachers do that, and some teachers say it's not necessary. So I let people do it because I think it benefits their mind. Whereas the monastic precepts, it's not that you take and then the next time they're offered you take again, and it's not like that. The Bodhisattva precepts, you take usually in the presence of one of your teachers, and then you renew them every morning and every evening yourself by visualizing the Buddha or in front of an altar with the Buddha statue. So the Bodhisattva precepts you continually take, and these precepts you can take by yourself, and every morning and evening. Whereas the pratimoksha precepts you have to take from a preceptor, actually from a sangha, from the whole community with a preceptor. In the Chinese tradition, a voluntary ceremony in which people offer their body to the Buddha precedes the taking of the Bodhisattva precepts. For monastics, this is done by making 3 small burn marks on the top of your head. For lay followers, they are on the arm. So they burn it here. Okay? So you'll be having this when you go. So this symbolizes offering one's body to the Buddha, to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and being willing to endure suffering when working for the benefit of sentient beings and striving for full awakening. So you're offering your body, and you're cultivating, the endurance to undergo suffering in order to be of benefit and service to sentient beings. Additionally, this is a third reason you take them. In ancient China, monastics were exempt from punishment by civil law because they were governed by the Vinaya precepts. To avoid arrest by the police and to gain offerings, some criminals would don monastic robes. To discriminate general monastics from impostors, the custom arose to burn the 3 or more cones of incense on monastics' head, because they figured that any criminals would not do that. You had to be really serious about benefiting sentient beings to do something like that. Okay, so that ceremony, just to talk about it, it's a very moving ceremony. I thought I'll talk about it because some people are going to be doing it before too long. They don't do this in the Tibetan tradition, but in the Chinese tradition they do. And so, at least in our ceremony, there's a table set up. A senior monastic is here, and then you kneel down in front, and they place there's small cones of incense on your head. Yeah, and maybe they put some butter on or something so they stick, and then they light it, and then everybody in the whole room is chanting the chant that we'll be doing this evening, Namo Bensa Setya Muni Pho. So it's a different melody than what we do this evening, the one we usually use with the hair cutting. And everybody's chanting that. So the whole room everybody's chanting homage to our fundamental teacher, or our root teacher, Shakyamuni Buddha. And then, the lines of monastics are there doing it. Not everybody does it at the same time because, or at least in mine, because there were 550 people. So, they had one set and then we left, and then another set came and they left and another set came. Okay, so you're there and everybody's chanting, and then it burns it. And it doesn't hurt very much. I mean, it's like going to the dentist, kind of, I think what happens is that people are so afraid of it that then, they get really scared. I was with one Western nun at her, when she was having it done, and she blacked out in the middle of it. I caught her. She was big too. So lucky she was kneeling, I couldn't have managed if she had fallen from standing up. But, and I think that happens because of people's fear and anxiety. It doesn't really hurt very much. Yeah. And then we've all had it done. Yeah, it's not very painful. And then as you come out, they have strips of watermelon rind cut very thin that is placed around, it, and that is said to cool it down, if there's any heat or pain or anything, it cools it down. And it works. Yeah. Yeah, it works, and then it heals, and there's little scabs there, and after a while the scabs fall off, and in my case my hair's kind of grown back because it was 31 years ago, so you can't see mine very well, but some of yours, yeah, you can see Venerable Jigme's. I think we can see yours. Yeah, can we see? Did you have it done? Oh, yeah. Yeah, yours are not. Yeah. Okay, so so it's actually quite moving because you're really feeling, I'm offering my body to the Buddha and I'm willing to undergo pain in order to benefit sentient beings. And then, of course, you have the support of the whole community with everybody chanting. Yeah. In my case, there were 550 of us at the ordination, 2 Westerners. So when the news came to film what was happening, guess who they, put the camera on. So I had already made the intention I was going to visualize light coming from the Buddha when I was doing that. But I didn't have to visualize because they were there with their bright lights. Yeah. Okay. In general, Japanese priests and committed lay followers take 16 Bodhisattva precepts. The first 5 correspond to the 5 lay precepts, and the last 3 are taking refuge in the 3 jewels. No, it's not the last 3. Oh, and yes, it is. The last 3 are taking refuge in the 3 jewels. The others are to abandon speaking of the misdeeds of others, praising oneself and disparaging others, without spiritual or material aid, withholding spiritual or material aid, indulging in anger, and reviling the 3 jewels. So you can see how those overlap with some of our root Bodhisattva precepts. The remaining 3 are to abandon evil, do good, and liberate all beings. Okay. In short, while differences exist in the delineation of the Bodhisattva precepts in various traditions, their essence and purpose remains the same. Okay. Then, moving on to the Pali tradition about Bodhicitta and Bodhisattvas. So this is something that most people in the Tibetan tradition have no clue about. Yeah. And I found it quite interesting to learn about this. So it's not that there's many people following this, but it definitely exists in the Pali tradition and in the Pali Sutras. And I imagine there's people who are following it. Actually, in the temple where I stayed when I went to Thailand, the master there had a really strong connection with Kuan Yin. And in fact, he was building a small Kuan Yin temple at his Theravada monastery. And he had been to Puto-san, and there was an incredible picture that they gave me. When he was at Puto-san, in front of one of the statues, there was like all this light coming into him. Remember the picture that we had here when Geshe Topke was blessing Chenrezig Hall, and you could see all that light coming? So this picture was like that. Yeah. So he had a very strong connection with Kuan Yin. And so, if you have that, then you must have some kind of feeling for bodhicitta. And it's interesting, I have one friend who is a Theravada monk, and he's taken tantric initiation as well as bodhisattva and tantric ethical restraints. He's a Westerner, so for followers of the Pali tradition, which vehicle to follow is an individual choice, and seeking the full awakening of Buddha is one option. Although most practitioners seek arhatship, the Bodhisattva path is set forth for exceptional individuals. The Buddha Vamsa, Charya Pitaka, Jataka's Mahapadana Sutta, and the Apadanas are canonical scriptures that speak about previous Buddhas fulfilling the Bodhisattva practices. Yeah, very interesting to read this. And especially there's an account of Shakyamuni Buddha when he was a bodhisattva, and the whole story of him generating bodhicitta. The 12th century Pali treatise Upasaka Jana Lankara by Tara Ananda from the Mahavihara tradition speaks of the awakening of Shravakas, Pratyekabuddhas, and Bodhisattvas in detail. So this is amazing because the Mahavihara tradition in Sri Lanka was the most conservative in the sense of really holding to the original Pali sutras, because what happened in Sri Lanka is, you had the initial wave of Buddhism coming with Ashoka's son and daughter in the 3rd century BC, and then later when Mahayana Buddhism became more popular in the Indian subcontinent, some people came and taught Mahayana in Sri Lanka. And so there grew up 2 different monasteries. One is 2 additional monasteries, Abhayagiri and Jetavana. And both of those, there were statues of bodhisattvas, there were Mahayana scriptures, and so on. So there were people definitely practicing that. And then, as usual, there's a power struggle between, this is the human beings, about which, tradition is going to be the most important. And so the king backed the Mahavihara and said to all the monks in the Jetavana and Abhayagiri monasteries, either you disrobe or you become Mahavihara monks. So that's how Mahavihara became prominent. Okay. All the traditions have some stuff. Okay. Yeah, so they kind of wiped out the Mahayana influence. But what's interesting now is, at least with the Westerners who are practicing Theravada, many of them, not all, but many are interested in the Bodhisattva vehicle. And maybe I should say some rather than many, some. Okay, so some Pali suttas emphasize compassion as the motivating force for the Buddha's attainment of awakening. He was the one individual who arose and came to be for the welfare of the multitude, for happiness of the multitude, out of compassion for the world, for the benefit, welfare, and happiness of gods and humans. So that what I just read is a stock phrase that you find again and again in the Pali Suttas. The Buddha told his disciples to cultivate the Dharma with that same compassionate motivation, so the holy life will last for a long time. And he sent monastics to spread the Dharma for that same reason. Okay. I have another Theravada friend who says, actually, there's not much evidence in the Pali scriptures that the Buddha had a compassionate motivation for attaining awakening, and he has his own sutras that he cites, but I don't believe it. If you're a Buddha, you're certainly not just looking out for yourself. Come on. Okay. So monastics are to engage in the path to liberation, not only for their own benefit, but also to preserve the Dharma for future generations and to become exemplars, inspiring others to practice the path and attain liberation. So you can see, that's when they ordain in the Theravada tradition. This is what they're taught. So they're not just taught, go for your own liberation and forget about everybody else. They're taught, you have to help preserve the Dharma. You have to become exemplars of practitioners that will inspire other people to ordain and to practice. Out of concern and compassion for others, the Buddha instructs his followers to abide harmoniously. He praises Mahakassapa for teaching the Dharma with compassion, and Mahakassapa himself says that he became a monastic and cultivated contentment with simple food, clothing, and shelter in order to benefit others. His hope was that others would see value in this lifestyle, adopt it for themselves, and attain liberation. And Mahakassapa was very conservative. Okay, Ananda was the one who has a much more compassionate nature, reaching out to others. Mahakasapa was much more reserved, much stricter with the precepts and so on. Ananda kept his precepts well, but he was the Buddha's attendant, so he was always helping people, and helping them contact the Buddha and so on. Monastics show compassion by being receptive, accepting offerings, and counseling those from all socioeconomic, racial, ethnic, and educational classes. Their duty is to receive their livelihood in a non-harmful manner, show people how to live ethically, encourage them to practice mindfulness, teach them the Dharma, and be grateful recipients of their gifts so that the laity will accumulate merit from making offerings. Okay, so this is something that is widely taught to the monastics in the Theravada tradition. It applies to those in the Mahayana tradition, but it's not taught in the same way or quite as widely. And so, because you see in Southeast Asia, they still go on Pindapat with their alms bowl in the villages, and then people put food in their bowls, or the people bring already prepared food to the temples, to the viharas, and offer it there. And so the idea is that that the monastics who are practicing well are objects with which you can create a lot of good karma. And so the laity is taught that by making offerings, especially offering sanghadana, offering food, then they create a great deal of merit, and that will help them in their future lives. So the lay people in the Theravada countries are very helpful to the monastics, and as a result, the Theravada monks don't work at all, and they don't suffer for anything. Okay, so it's interesting, because they're taught that in accepting the offerings of the lay people, that is your practice of compassion, because it allows the lay people to accumulate merit. Okay, so the same holds for us, but we don't emphasize that so much we emphasize, the importance of making offerings and offering to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. But the flavor of it, it's somehow quite different. And it's hard for me to describe. Anybody want to try?
Well, the thing that strikes me is that although we revere our teachers, something to me about the way that they show reverence, both the monastics, both the bhikkhunis to the bhikkhus, and the lay people to the monastics, seems a little culturally different to me. There's something that I find quite different about it.
Yeah, well, the Sangha in the Theravada countries is very, very well respected. And also in Chinese Buddhism, very well respected by the laity. In the Tibetan tradition, people they respect the Sangha, but not as much. Everything goes towards the teachers. Towards your lamas and the rinpoches. So that's one difference. I think it would actually help Tibetan Buddhism better to have, to really talk about the benefit of monastics and have more respect for monastic, and not just everything going to the, up.
Maybe the reason in Tibet that all the stuff ends up going to the highly realized practitioners is because they're seen as bodhisattvas who will share it.
Yeah.
And then the Theravadan countries, it's more equally distributed because they don't have that expectation.
Right. Yeah. And so it does become incumbent in the Tibetan monasteries that the teachers and the Rinpoches bring back offerings to support the monasteries.
Do Theravadan practitioners say, I take refuge in the Guru?
Do they take refuge in the Buddha? Yes.
The Guru.
The Guru.
Yeah,
No, not the way we do.
And that
Yeah.
could also be it, because the practitioners see their Lama or their Guru as, truly caring for them completely.
Yeah. It's a different way of viewing your teacher, so it's done. Yeah. So it has its benefits, it has its disadvantages.
Arju Rinpoche was telling me the story of how he spent some time in Burma and was overwhelmed with impressions of how deep their practice was, and had tremendous admiration for the way things were being done.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've heard it said that, in Mahayana traditions, the lay people and the monastics are more on equal footing. They both have kind of equal access to practicing and liberation, whereas in Theravadan, there's more a hierarchy. Like the monastics are the spiritual practitioners, and the lay people, the most they can hope to do is really contribute and then benefit their next lifetime.
Yeah, that's been the old thing, but that was also the same way in Tibet. The lay practitioners, you had some lay practitioners, you had lay lamas and all, but most of the householders, they made offerings and set up their altar, and that was about it. But the thing is, all of that is really changing now in the 20th and 21st century, where lay people are more educated and really want to study and practice. Yeah, so that whole thing is very much changing, actually in all the traditions. Yeah. Okay, so the oldest Pali scriptures speak of bodhisattvas who, in their last lives as sentient beings, become fully awakened Buddhas without the aid of a teacher. They begin a dispensation, or sasana, turning the Dharma wheel, so the enlightening teachings will exist in the world. This is the awakening attained by Buddhas, and it is extolled as superior to the awakening of Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, or hearers and solitary realizers. While some ancient Pali sages said that the Bodhisattva path is only for those who are destined to become wheel-turning Buddhas, the South Indian commentator Dhammapala did not concur, and instead described a bodhisattva path open to others who aspire to follow it. So Dhammapala lived 6th century AD, about 100 years after Buddhaghosa. In a post-canonical Pali composition, Dasa Bodhisattva Bodhicitta, the Buddha said, "There have been and will be limitless and countless Aryas who with courage and determination have successively fulfilled the paramis, or paramitas, the perfections, will attain Buddhahood and pass away having completed a Buddha's duty." It then tells the stories of 10 bodhisattvas who will do this in the future. So this is a post-canonical Pali text. So what you have in the Pali system, as well as in the Sanskrit system, is you have the sutras, and then you have commentaries that came afterwards, where people elaborated on what was taught in the sutras or pulled out different points and explained them. Okay? And so, it's good to always differentiate what was taught in the sutras and then what was taught in a commentary or a treatise. Yeah, because the commentaries and treatises pull things out often from different sources. They emphasize different points. They explain things and flesh it out. Okay. The Bodhisattva ideal is not foreign to Theravada countries. Historically, there was interest in the Bodhisattva path in Sri Lanka, and statues of the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara have been unearthed in Sri Lanka, Thailand, and other Theravada countries. In the past and present, kings and the populace in Theravada areas found the Bodhisattva ideal exemplary. Beginning around the 8th century, some kings in Sri Lanka, Burma, and Thailand either were referred to as bodhisattvas by others or declared themselves to be bodhisattvas or practitioners of the bodhisattva path. So there was, a lot of esteem for bodhisattvas. Some Theravada scholars and textual scribes in the colophon of their writings declared their bodhicitta motivation, saying Buddho bhavayam, or may I become a Buddha. Buddhaghosa was regarded as the incarnation of Maitreya Buddha by the monks of the Mahavihara monastery. So you also have this thing of people who practice very well were regarded as bodhisattvas or emanation of bodhisattvas. So this happened, in the earlier centuries in Theravada Buddhism, and then clearly in Tibetan Buddhism. Yeah, and so you had the whole advent of the tulku system. Some Theravada practitioners find the Bodhisattva path appealing and practice it. Nowadays, there are both monastic and lay Buddhists in Theravada countries who make the resolve to become Buddhas for the benefit of all sentient beings. In Thailand, 2 Thai masters are regarded as incarnations of the Bodhisattva Maitreya. So interesting, yeah. The pure intention of a bodhisattva is illustrated in the story of the Buddha's previous life as King Sivi, who desired to give his eyes to someone in need. To test him, Saka, or Shaka, Lord of the Devas, appeared as a decrepit, blind old man who asked the king for his eyes. With great joy, King Sivi immediately had the doctor remove his eyes to give to the old man. After doing this, he said, "While I was desiring to give, while I was giving, and after the gift had been given by me, there was no contradictory state of mind. It was for the sake of awakening itself. Omniscience was dear to me, therefore I gave the eyes." Pretty bodhisattva, isn't it?
Doesn't that statement he makes after clarify that he did this for awakening and compassionate giving was a means to an end?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Isn't that not Buddha-like? Isn't that self-service?
No, because remember that full awakening is the fulfillment of your own purpose and the purpose of others. And those two are complementary, they're not contradictory. So you have to aspire to attain full awakening yourself in order to be of great benefit to others. So it's not selfish. Yeah. So everything that is done to benefit yourself is not selfish.
As long as it benefits others.
Yeah. What I was saying is, the other day that you do all these different practices and things for the long-term goal of becoming a Buddha, and you're trying to create merit because you need a lot of merit to gain realizations. So it looks like, you could say, I'm creating merit. Look, I gave the Buddha some oranges. Yeah, I'm creating merit. Now, if you're doing it like, I'm creating merit, but even if you have the motivation to have a good future life, that's still meritorious because it's better than keeping the oranges for yourself. Yeah. But in addition to that, if you think, I'm going to give the oranges to accumulate be out of reverence for the Buddha's and Bodhisattva's spiritual accomplishments, because I want to, I respect what they've done and I want to do the same thing. And I need to create merit, and they're a field of merit because of their spiritual attainments. So I can create a lot of merit by making offerings to them. And you do it with that motivation. You're accumulating the merit, but your whole motivation is centered on, the ultimate aim of attaining Buddhahood so you can most effectively serve others. Okay? Yeah. So we get often this thing that if you do anything for yourself, it must be selfish. That's incorrect. Okay.
I mean, he still took his eyes out.
He still took his eyes out, but he wanted to do it as, making offering to generate merit that he dedicated for full awakening.
I think sometimes Westerners do not give enough importance to intention. I find that constantly I'm surprised by the role of intention.
Yes.
For us, the main thing is the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and that's not Buddhist at all.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, because Westerners, we want to look good on the outside. Yeah, as long as it looks like we're generous, we think that's okay. And in Buddhism, it says that how you look isn't worth beans. It's what your intention is. Yeah. So it's difficult to be a hypocrite if you're a genuine practitioner. Yeah. If you're a phony baloney practitioner, then it's very easy to be a hypocrite. But we all create our own karma, so we experience the result of the causes we ourselves create. The Buddha Vamsa relates the inspiring story when Gautama Buddha generated Bodhicitta in his previous life. Born into a wealthy family, the Brahmin Sumedha lived a life of luxury. When his parents died, however, he realized the impermanence of mundane happiness, resolved to seek liberation, and became a matted hair ascetic. Okay, so maybe, Jazz, this was your previous incarnation. Okay. One day, he learned that Buddha Dipamkara and his disciples were to visit the city near his hermitage. Descending from his hermitage, he began to clear the path for them, but was unable to finish before they arrived. As the Buddha Dipamkara approached, Sumedha, elated to see him, prostrated and lay down in the mud. Sumedha relates this moving event. Loosening my hair, spreading my bark garments and piece of hide there in the mire. Yeah, and the afternoon session would be helpful to have a light because I can't see it so well. A piece of hide there in the mire. I lay down prone. Let the Buddha tread on me with his disciples. Do not let him tread in the mire. It will be for my welfare. So there he was, he spread out his hair, his bark garments, because he was a matted hair ascetic, and the hide he was wearing. And then he just lay down in the mud out of respect for the Buddha and his disciples, so that the Buddha wouldn't have to step in the mud and could instead step on him and walk across in that way. When he initially invited the Buddha and his disciples to use him as a bridge across the mud, Sumedha was focused on his own welfare. He knew that if he wished, he could eradicate defilements and become an arhat that very day by listening to a discourse by Buddha Dipankara. Questioning his self-centered intention, he made an unshakable resolve to become a Buddha and lead all others out of samsara. So this is why he's laying down in the mud. So he thinks, what is the use while I remain ignorant of realizing Dharma here? Having reached omniscience, I will become a Buddha in this world with its devas. What is the use of my crossing over alone to nirvana, being a person aware of my strength? Having reached omniscience, I will cause the world, together with its devas, to cross over. By my merit toward the supreme amongst human beings, the Buddha, I will reach omniscience. I will cause many beings to cross over, cutting through the stream of samsara, shattering 3 renewed existences, embarking on the ship of the Dharma. I will cause the world with its devas to cross over. Isn't that beautiful? Dipankara Buddha then predicted Sumedha's full awakening, so he received a prophecy. He would actualize his vow to attain full awakening, becoming a Buddha with the name Gautama after 4 countless ages and 100,000 eons. Going into seclusion, Sumedha contemplated how to fulfill his aim of full awakening and saw that the main virtuous qualities to develop were the 10 paramis. Here, a full-fledged bodhisattva path is set out in the Pali scriptures. All 24 Buddhas whose life stories are found in the Buddha Vamsa went through a similar process. First, they made an unshakable resolve to become a bodhisattva, then a Buddha by practicing the path with great diligence for a long time. This mental determination is made once. Then, in the presence of a series of Buddhas, they make an aspiration to attain full awakening for the benefit of all sentient beings. Bodhisattvas then perform an act of merit to demonstrate to each Buddha their sincerity and dedication to fulfill that aspiration, and that Buddha then predicts their success in doing this. So this is a very similar process in all these stories in the Buddha Vamsa, how somebody gets enlightened. For the bodhisattva aspiration to be fulfilled in Buddhahood, it must be supported by 8 conditions. Okay, so this is the Pali. Yeah, the person is a human being. The person is a human being. 1, is male, has the natural supportive condition, so a firm Dharma practice, has generated the bodhisattva aspiration in the presence of a Buddha, is a renunciate, so a monastic. Yeah, they say only monastics can become Buddhas. Have achieved noble qualities such as the super knowledges and the higher states of meditative absorption. Has such deep dedication and devotion for the Buddha that he is willing to give up his life to perform great acts of merit for the 3 jewels, and has strong virtuous desire and determination to cultivate the qualities leading to Buddhahood. Okay, so this thing about being a male, this is very typical for the canon. It's this kind of thing is often said, and it's usually said, if you look at ancient Indian society, the women were kind of how if you've done any reading about how the women in Afghanistan and in Muslim countries are treated, that's how it was for the women in ancient India. They were under the guardianship first of their father, then their husband, and then their son. So the Buddha was quite avant-garde in letting women renounce and become nuns, because only the Buddhists, and the Jains allowed women to do that. All the other wandering sects forbid that. So the idea was that the males were strong and, physically and mentally, and could attain awakening. His Holiness now says, that male strength, that was nice when the world depended on strong bodies, but now that's not what's needed so much. We have machines that can do all of that. And so he really is advocating that the compassion that women show is quite needed in the world today. A bodhisattva's desire for full awakening should be so intense that if he were to hear Buddhahood can only be attained after experiencing torture in hell for 4 countless eons and 100,000 eons, he would not deem that difficult to do, but would be filled with desire for the task and would not shrink away. The Bodhisattva then investigates the paramis, trains in them, and fulfills them. Okay, so you see both in the Pali Suttas and the Mahayana Suttas, you have to have very, very strong determination to follow the Bodhisattva path. A very strong commitment, long-term vision. Yeah, again, not for wimps. In addition to generating the aspiration for full awakening, great compassion and skillful means are needed to practice the paramis. Skillful means is the wisdom that transforms the paramis into the collections necessary to attain full awakening. Uniting this practice of wisdom and compassion, the Bodhisattva fulfills the 10 paramis, practices zeal, competence, stability, and beneficent conduct, and cultivates 6 inclinations: renunciation, solitude, non-attachment, non-hatred, non-confusion, and release from samsara. Okay, so here you see the same thing, the Bodhisattva needs wisdom, needs compassion, needs skillful means, and there's mention of the collections that are developed through practicing the paramis. In the Sanskrit tradition, they speak specifically of the collection of merit and collection of wisdom. But the word that the Pali translators use, what is it? Is it requisites I think they use the word requisites, where we, for awakening, where we use the collections, but the meaning is pretty much the same. Okay, any questions before we go to the next? Yeah?
I'm wondering what the difference is between renunciation and release from samsara.
Okay, renunciation often in the Pali scriptures seems to be more a renunciation of sensual desire, whereas release is the attainment of liberation.
Two questions. The first one is about the skillful means, and I had heard it said before, I don't remember where this was, I don't know if it was a monastic gathering or what, that in the Pali tradition they didn't have that idea. And so I'm looking this up in this dictionary. They have the word that you have here, and they say that the rare Pali form refers specifically to the Buddha's teaching proficiency.
Yeah.
Something about the simile of the rat. Have you heard that notion before?
Well, here it is. Skillful means is the wisdom that transforms the paramis into the collections necessary to attain full awakening. So that must include having compassion, changing your motivation, having, integrating it with wisdom and so on. Usually in Mahayana, skillful means refers to how the Buddhas teach people according to their disposition and what they need. But that isn't the meaning of the same term in the Pali. Yeah, it's explained differently.
And then the other thing I was wondering, maybe you can speak about this now or maybe at another time, but just with this whole section and maybe the book in general, when you had people in the Theravada tradition read it, did they concur with what you had presented, or did they have differences?
Yeah, I haven't talked so much. I haven't received a lot of feedback on this from my Theravada friends. But most of what everything I put in here is stuff from the canon or the post-canonical texts. It wasn't things that I learned by discussions from people when I was in Thailand, because I wanted to really rely on the texts, because those are the people will respect more.
Did Bhikkhu Bodhi comment on it? Because he read this, didn't
He was the one who gave me the text by Dhammapala on the 10 paramis. He was the one who gave it to me. So, yeah, so he definitely recognizes it in the tradition. Yeah. And if you look in the sacred books of the East, I think in that series, you have the translation of the Buddha's Vamsa and many of these other texts. Yeah, they're there.
So the last sentence, are those in order of attainment, or are they in no particular order?
The 6 inclinations?
Yes.
I don't know. I think I put them in, and I was trying to include things, but the publisher was really pressuring me not to make things too long. So it's not explained here, and I don't remember the more about them.
I was confused because the last one, released from samsara, you said that was liberation.
Yeah.
Does it make sense for a bodhisattva to be liberated?
Yes.
But then they wouldn't come back.
No, see,
I'm confused.
That's the wrong idea that many people have. This idea is prominent very much. People are very confused about it, especially in the Chinese tradition. And they'll say, that the bodhisattvas vow to remain bodhisattvas so they can keep keep getting reborn in samsara, and so they don't attain Buddhahood. Yeah, out of compassion for sentient beings. That's incorrect. Okay? I think we talked about it a few days ago, that from the bodhisattva's perspective, if it were more beneficial for them to remain in samsara, meaning not eliminating the 2 obscurations, and remaining as an ordinary being under the affliction, under the influence of afflictions and karma. If it were more beneficial for sentient beings, they would be willing to remain in that state of dukkha. However, they look and they say, if I don't attain liberation and I remain ignorant, full of afflictions, under the sway of polluted karma, how am I going to help other sentient beings? Okay, so the idea is, when they say they're going to stay in samsara and forgo liberation, it's a way of saying, my compassion for sentient beings is so strong that I'm willing to do that if that were more beneficial. But it's clearly not the most beneficial. The most beneficial is if they attain Buddhahood as soon as possible, because then they'll have the wisdom, compassion, skillful means to be able to benefit sentient beings, and they'll be able to, emanate many, many bodies to benefit others. Yeah, which is different than, if let's say I said, oh, I'm a bodhisattva, I have so much compassion for sentient beings, but I'm foregoing my liberation in order to stay here and benefit sentient beings. How much am I going to be able to benefit sentient beings when my own mind is totally confused? Okay? So bodhisattvas say that as an illustration of the strength of their compassion for sentient beings. They don't really, that's not actually how it plays out. It's, for example, okay, let's say somebody wants to be a doctor and they have really strong compassion and they say, here's all these people who need doctors right now. And so they say, I'm going to remain here in this country where there are no other doctors to be doctors for all these poor people because there's no other doctors here. But this is some guy who's totally untrained. Is that going to work? Yeah, what good can he do? So he's saying that as an indication of his compassion. But of course, if he really wants to benefit others, he's got to go to college and then go do his pre-med work and do med school and do residency. And then he's really equipped to be a good doctor.
So are the highest level bodhisattvas also then, I don't want to use, I think arhat refers to somebody who's following the higher path, but are they technically at like the same level of attainment? Like, are they living in nirvana?
Oh, okay. Bodhisattvas at the eighth level or eighth ground bodhisattvas, they are equivalent to arhats in the sense that both arhats and eighth ground bodhisattvas have eliminated the afflictive obscurations. However, those bodhisattvas have a much greater accumulation of merit, much greater compassion, and they're definitely on the road to Buddhahood as quick as they can do it, whereas the arhats are not.
So at the end of one of these eighth ground bodhisattvas' lives, if they I think it's actually, never mind. I'll ask later.
Okay.
I was wondering from the story of his donating his eyes, so to speak, if there was a Pali tradition of equalizing, exchanging self and other, or an equivalent to really develop that bodhicitta.
I haven't run across that. Yeah, I haven't run across that. Yeah.
In the Pali tradition, do they hold that one has to, at some point, encounter a Buddha incarnate in human form in order to be on the path to Buddhahood themselves, or
Yeah.
are the other manifestation bodies of a Buddha potentially
in the
serve
Pali
purpose?
tradition, they don't talk about the Buddha having other bodies and manifestation bodies like that.
So if one just doesn't encounter a Buddha ever, then they can never become a Buddha.
Yeah, but apparently people who accumulate the merit and have that aspiration, they've created the cause to meet a Buddha who will give them the prophecy when they've created enough of the causes for that to happen.
What about the Buddha?
So the Buddha practiced a whole lot before this lifetime. Yeah, it wasn't that the Buddha started out as Joe Blow down at the local pub and then became a Buddha like that. For many, many previous lifetimes he practiced. And that's according to the Pali tradition. In the Mahayana tradition, we say actually the Buddha got enlightened a long time ago and manifest as Siddhartha Gautama in this lifetime in order to show and to demonstrate the importance of practice.
So,
Yeah, but he was actually enlightened a long time ago.
So in the Pali tradition, they either see the Buddha through all of his lifetimes of practice as a potential exception to the rule, or at some point in his infinite lifetimes of practice, he himself encountered a Buddha.
Well, they just said that Sameda was one of the Buddha's previous lives, and so he did get a prophecy from different karma.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, but at that same time, couldn't you continuously take that back and back and back and back and assume that at some point there was a Buddha that was an exception to the rule? Or because at some point there's no Buddha to
you know, when
influence a Buddha.
when they lay things out like this, you know, and this is the structure, and first you do this, then you do this, and then you do this, then that happens. You know, I think they're giving a general overview of the sequence, but we shouldn't make it, you know, real rigid as if it's cookie cutter enlightenment. Yeah. You know, you know, they lay things out so you get an idea of what has to be done. But every individual is very, very different. Okay.
I just wonder if in their scriptures they leave room for the non-Buddha encounter to potentially happen in anybody's lifetime.
Well, that's an interesting question, because they say that there's wheel-turning Buddhas. I mean, some people in the Pali tradition say there's wheel-turning Buddhas, and they're the only, meaning that they teach the Buddha, they teach the Dharma in an era where the Buddha Dharma is not present in the world. And those Buddhas, there's only a few people who become those Buddhas. Everybody else becomes arhats. This talk of the Bodhisattva path, yeah, is that it seems that it is much more open to everybody. This is something that came many centuries later, that I think is due in part to the influence of the Mahayana, and in part probably from the scriptures in the Pali. Okay? Because it's really hard to trace the development of the ideas in all of the different Buddhist traditions, because ideas did develop. Yeah? And like I said, different people emphasize different things. So it's hard to say. So, you know, there's some people, you know, in Theravada countries, they don't think much about this at all. Okay. And then there's other people that are going to be interested in it and in the practice of the paramis and study that text.
A question kind of relating to something that came up on one of our discussion groups about working with the energy of inspiration when we hear lots of different teachings, and there's so many topics and meditations to do that we've just covered in just this year, and and the energy of, I'll focus on this, and I'll focus on this, but then not enough time in the day, and how to kind of make it work with a happy mind.
Yeah. Okay. So you're getting lots of teachings. You have an intensive course on this topic, and then an intensive one on this, and an intensive one on this, and they're all inspiring, and you want to do all of them, and you get totally confused about, what do I practice? I think this is in part what happens in the West, because I think in the monasteries in Asia, there are special teachings that happen, but usually you have your monastic curriculum and you stay in the monastery and you train. You do this text, and then you do that text, and then you do the other text, and you follow this curriculum. And then there's special teachings when high teachers come, so they may get confused as well about that, but they always have their main curriculum that they're following. In the West, nobody has time. The lay, see, if you're a monastic, you have the time to follow a curriculum. Yeah. Lay people don't have time to do that. So Dharma centers focus on short bits of teachings, a weekend, a week, something. Did I? Oh no, my precious microphone. Don't break, please. It's back, okay. I'm sorry. Anybody have a money pill? We can. We need to do puja. So there's this whole thing in the West. Lay people, they want short teachings, a week at the most. Because people have jobs. They get 2 weeks off of vacation. They're willing to spend 1 week on the Dharma, but the other they have to go rest, okay, and do something fun. And then maybe, after you're retired, you have more time. But then some people, even after they retire, don't have a lot of time, okay? And so you get this thing of, short bits of intense teaching, yeah. And then also because often you're bringing teachers from India, and so the teachers have a responsibility to teach in India. They can't stay a long time in the West. Many centers want them to come, so they go on a tour, and they're 2 days here and 3 days there and a week there, and so on. Okay? And so that's very often the way things are in the West. Okay, and what often happens because of it is people who haven't studied the Lamrim and they don't know the sequence of teachings get very confused because each teacher comes and teaches something fantastic that they want to practice, and they don't know how it goes in any kind of sequence and how the topics relate to each other. So this is the real value of learning the Lamrim, is that you can really see how these things fit together. Okay, so here, we have our regular study program where we have a sequence of teachings, and that should be the main thing. We've got the Gomchen Lamrim, yeah, and now we're starting with some of the debate teachings, and so that should be the main thing that people focus on, yeah, but that's once a week, and so whether you get around to reviewing your notes, but that really should be the thing that you're basing your meditation on. And it doesn't mean that when we stop, like we've already done the topic of Bodhichitta in the Gomchen Lamrim, it doesn't mean that you stop meditating on it, because we're now talking about concentration, and you only do concentration when we're teaching that, and then you stop when we go on to wisdom. But you keep practicing what you're doing, and I think this is also the value of going through the Lamrim topics, cycling through them so that you keep all of them fresh in your mind. And this is also the value of reading one of the glance meditations every day, because it keeps the topics that you've meditated on fresh in your mind. But in terms of your own personal practice, you have to see what do I really need to practice now? Okay, we're getting these teachings from Jeffrey on Dzogchen. Yeah, they're not the teachings that I would have requested for us. They're the teachings that Jeffrey wants to give because he's writing his book and he needs an audience. Okay? But when you look at your practice, is this what you need to practice right now and make the center point of your practice? You know what the Lamrim is, and you know what's at the beginning. You've studied it. You know what's at the beginning, what's the middle, going on. You know what the three principal aspects of the path are. You know Dzogchen is a very high advanced teaching. Yeah. What do you need to do in your practice?
Lamrim.
Yeah, we need to do Lamrim. What else do we need to do?
To stay with the three principles.
Stay with the three principles. What else do we need to do?
Purify.
Purification, creation of merit. You know, that's why there are the Nundro practices, the thought training. Yeah, so that we know how to deal with daily life situations. Yeah, because if you can't deal with daily life situations and you're creating tons of negative karma because you're just getting angry right, left, and center, you know, but you're doing meditation on some, you know, you're meditating on highest yoga tantra, but you're getting mad at all the people around you, then are you doing what you really need to be doing? Okay? So, you know, we have to be practical. And it's true, there's a lot of teachings and they're all inspiring, and we want to practice all of them at once, and there's not enough time. So what we have to do is scope out for ourselves, what is it that I need to be emphasizing? If you have daily commitments, you do your daily commitments. You know, but most of those, some of those you can go through very quickly because you need to spend more of your time on, you know, purification and Lamrim and thought training so that you can just become a person who can function in this world without driving yourself and everybody crazy. Yeah? Yeah. And I say this because I've lived with Dharma practitioners for a long time. And some people who have fantastic, I mean, their understanding, intellectual understanding is fantastic. But they're so difficult to be with. You know? Oh, my goodness. So, you know, I'm much more in the tradition of the Kadamba Geshis. And, you know, the Kadamba Geshis are like feet on the ground. And they have their mystical tradition, quite a mystical tradition, the Kadamba. But basically, the stories you hear about the Kadamba Geshis, they're all feet on the ground stories, aren't they? Yeah. And so, you know, you got to practice where you're at. Know that you'll eventually get to the part where you can do those advanced practices. You know, in the case if you have highest class Tantra initiation, you do your daily practices, but they're not what you're emphasizing. Because if you don't have a solid foundation in the three principles, how are you going to realize that stuff? Yeah? So you do that to put imprints in your mind of the teachings that you're going to practice later, but you keep yourself with what you need to be doing now. Okay? That is my advice. Other people may give you other advice. You decide whose advice you're going to follow. Okay? That is up to you to decide.
That reminds me of the Geshe from Long Beach. His name was the one who passed away. That was
Geshe Gelsen.
Geshe Gelsen.
Yeah.
I remember hearing you. I think you told us that when he was passing away, the text that he had with him was the three principal aspects of the path. That was. Do you remember that story?
Oh, I don't.
Oh, yeah, I remember you telling us this.
Okay.
They were like he was with the monks. And he had a text that he had with him. That's the text that he chose, you know, that he was kind of focusing on. Mm. To me, that always meant a lot. It's like, because everything is there. And,
yeah,
you know, for where, I don't know, just said a lot.
Yeah. And Geshe Sona Rinchen was focusing on the wisdom going beyond that we chant. Yeah, that was what he had people reading, you know, as he was dying. Okay. So you have to rein yourself in, because if you look, you get this, But then when you sit down to do anything for a while, like right now you're all jazzed on bodhicitta. But if you sit down and start meditating on bodhicitta for a while, then you're going to come to me and say, I'm meditating on bodhicitta, but I'm not having any kind of real strong experiences. I want to meditate on concentration. I want to do that. And ever since I said that it's not recommended for people to meditate on the conventional nature of the mind, because you could slip into blank-minded meditation, since I said that, then people want to meditate on that. Okay? So, you have to say, do I just drop everything I do and then do that? Or do I do a little bit of concentration meditation every day, a little bit of bodhicitta every day, a little bit of emptiness every day, so that I'm gradually building things up? Okay? And, and the whole thing of purification and creation of merit is very important. Very important, because that makes your mind soft and flexible and receptive. Okay, and at different times in your practice, you need to emphasize different things. Each winter we do a retreat, we emphasize a different practice. So for the period of that retreat, you emphasize that practice. You still keep your glance meditation and you remember your other practices, although you're emphasizing this, and you know where this practice belongs in the whole schema of the Lamrim.
I found chapter 5 of Nagarjuna's Precious Garland really helpful in terms of a guide for myself. He says, you're ordained, study your precepts, study the Dharma, and then here are the 57 faults, get to know them well. And that's been very humbling. It's like, can I even recognize the difference between them? Learning to recognize them in my own mind. If I can do that just in this life, I think that would be some progress.
Yeah.
And then, there's more that comes later to keep in mind. But I was really struck by those 57, and that he says that is the cornerstone of your monastic practice, your spiritual life.
Yeah. Yeah. We have to become familiar with what's operating in our mind, and be able to discern what's virtuous and what's not virtuous. And it's not always so easy. So we got to get our basic behavior, like I said, so we could become a kind person who functions well in this world and doesn't create a ton of negative karma.